Jessie is the Restoration Program Manager at Save the Bay, working to protect and restore the bay for people and wildlife. She works on the habitat restoration team to implement transition zone revegetation projects and educate community members about nature-based solutions to sea level rise. Our team most recently finished planting the Palo Alto horizontal levee and the Ravenswood All-American Canal in the South Bay this winter. So from North Bay to South Bay, Jessie, I'll pass it to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here today. And today I'm going to be sharing project design and lessons learned from a large-scale habitat transition zone revegetation project led by Save the Bay along the Ravenswood R4 Pond down in Menlo Park. So really focused on the South Bay today. Briefly, Save the Bay has been doing restoration work at multiple sites around the bay for over 20 years. For much of that time, we worked on smaller scale sites, typically less than an acre, and we used those sites to engage the public through school, community, public, and corporate restoration programs. But over the years, we really recognized the urgent need for more rapid, large scale restoration of the transition zone habitat. As Peter mentioned earlier, we had the opportunity to work on the Oraloma Horizontal Levee project, amplifying rhizomatous perennials in an abbreviated timeline. And the successive methods used at Oraloma helped us learn techniques for large-scale, low-cost plant propagation that we've adapted and scaled up for other sites, most notably at Ravenswood. Next slide. So just for some context, Ravenswood is a large site with two habitat transition zones that are labeled here, totaling 25 acres that we were responsible for revegetating. In addition to these two sites, part of the project included an on-site division bed nursery, which we were able to construct in partnership with West Bay Sanitary District, who manages the land adjacent to the project site. And that nursery is sort of in the top left corner above Bedwell Bayfront Park, in the little unhighlighted zone outside of the purple. And so we began this project in 2018 with the construction of the division bed nursery, and our first planting season was in 2021. Some of the methods that we used for large-scale revegetation projects are less suitable for volunteer involvement than the small-scale restoration that we were focused on previously as an organization. Despite that, we have continued incorporating community engagement into our work as much as possible, while also revegetating higher acreage sites and contributing to regional restoration goals. And Ravenswood has been a very accessible and successful site for engaging most specifically adult volunteers over our project timeline. Next slide. Now, I mentioned that the division bed nursery earlier, and when it comes to revegetating such a large scale site, the division bed nursery is a very important piece of the puzzle for us. The division bed nursery looks sort of like that of your backyard raised bed garden. And for this project, it included 84 beds that we filled with a palette of rhizomatous perennial native species that grew over several years to fill out the beds into dense sod. The nursery provides two other big benefits to us compared to traditional container plant nurseries, a very significant reduced cost and an increased capacity for the amount of plant material we can grow. The proximity of this nursery to the site also reduces time and labor in transporting plant material when we are ready to outplant. Adult volunteers were instrumental in initially constructing the division bed nursery here and have contributed to its ongoing maintenance. Next slide. Awesome. So the revegetation methods and native plant species selection for this project were guided by Peter Bay. So it's awesome to have him here telling us all about it. And in this case included 4 functional groups: clonal meadow species, diversity patch species, refuge species, and an annual native cover crop. Each functional group provided different benefits to the project's overall restoration goals. They were planted sequentially and using different methods based on their functional group. And the source material for both rhizomes and native seeds came from permitted collection sites around the South Bay, with some native seed amplification done by hedgerow farms as well. Many of the native plant species included in the project are clonal and rhizomatous, and therefore could move upslope and better adapt to changing sea levels over time. as well as help trap soil and reduce erosion on sites because their rhizomes run near the soil surface. And some of those species are shown on this slide here. Next slide. Okay, so here there's a lot going on, but here you can see an overview of our planting timeline for revegetating these slopes, which involved pretty laborious preparation of the slope in the fall, with the majority of planting through the fall and winter. So in October and November, we were focused on site and sod preparation. Site preparation included pulling several tons of mature Russian thistle from the slope, which you can see in this top left photo here, before having a farmer named Frank Imhoff come out to the site and disc the slope to remove any remaining invasive species and to break up the soil, which was compacted from grading. Our staff then prepared sod from the Clonal Meadow species division beds, and you can see that sod in this like middle top photo here, Elisa holding a big chunk of sod ready to lay it out on the slope. After Clonal Meadow sod pieces were laid by hand across the slope, the farmer returned to the site to disperse the Clonal Meadow group across the slope by disking it in using a tractor and disc harrow, which is pictured on the bottom left. The Clonal Meadow species were selected because they are highly resilient to disturbance and tolerant of this planting method. And I just really want to highlight that this planting method at All American Canal, the first year of planting, allowed us to plant in one morning what it would otherwise have taken us more than a full season to get in the ground, which is really incredible. We followed the disking method with hand planting and seeding of the remaining species. And these subsequent species were less stress tolerant to being driven over by a tractor, but provide additional ecosystem services, including vital pollinator habitat, biodiversity, high tide refugia, adjacent to newly developing tidal channels. While disking and hand seeding happened just in the first planting season, infill container planting has continued at both of the Ravenswood sites for several years after the initial planting season. And we have found that this container planting is really the most suitable planting method for engaging volunteers. Next slide. Of course, planting the site is only one phase of the process, and weeding non-native invasives actually accounts for the majority of our work on site every year. No matter how clean the soil was, in our case, there was a large invasive seed bank that established itself on site by the time we were planting. There are also seed sources surrounding the site that continue to be a seed bank over time. The biggest problem species that we're facing at this project are listed here on the slide, and support from volunteers and the San Jose Conservation Corps has been really vital in being able to tackle weeds on such a big site. One thing we've also learned over time is that you really need to build in green waste dumpsters into your budget for a way to dispose of seeding invasive species offsite. Next slide. Now, as I touched on in the beginning, engaging the community in our work is a huge part of Save the Bay's mission and restoration goals. Projects like the R4 pond restoration are exciting and monumental. And while tidal marsh restoration doesn't as frequently present opportunities for the public to get involved, transition zone revegetation projects are often very accessible and provide opportunities for community members to take an active role in shoreline projects that directly benefit their communities. On this project, of course, COVID-19 did delay our start time for engaging volunteers in this work. So we couldn't start bringing folks to the site until the spring of 2022. But since restrictions have eased, we've engaged nearly 1,000 volunteers on this project, getting their hands in the dirt and educating them about nature-based solutions and marsh migration. Due to a funding opportunity with Ducks Unlimited, we also were able to contract with San Jose Conservation Corps for this project, and each Corps workday hosts 6 to 7 Corps members in the field. This has doubled the capacity of our 6 full-time Save the Bay staff team, and also provided workforce development opportunities for Corps members in the field of habitat restoration and ecology. Next slide. So we learned a lot. We've learned so much, and we're still learning. But as I mentioned before, working with a workforce development crew has been really, really beneficial on these projects and would be highly recommended. We saw a lot of success with our annual seed mix the first year, and the disking process worked really well for the native plants that we disked in across the slope. things are spreading. High survivorship of the native species has been really wonderful. And we've also just seen like qualitatively reduced weed coverage when we're really able to get to the slope, hit those weeds before they go to seed. Next slide. And of course, we also better understand our constraints. Access to the site was a much larger challenge to navigate than expected for this project as we timed our work between wet weather, nesting plovers, and then this year, we also introduced the challenge of an extended government shutdown, which meant that we couldn't host any volunteers on site during that time. We learned that while planting labor is decreased by disking, the process of preparing and translocating sod to the slope is very intense. And I'm curious to experiment with this chainsaw method that Peter mentioned in the beginning. But the sod work is also a little less conducive to volunteer work. So that's something we have to factor in. And it is just challenging to generate enough plant material to cover these large acreage slopes before weeds can establish themselves. There's also a high non-native invasive seed bank in the soil, which we're constantly working to hold back and really rely on volunteers for support on that. And then, of course, rain is wonderful. We just had some lovely rain yesterday. But in California, it's hard to rely on the rain at the exact right time of year that you need it, and our ability to irrigate the slope is really limited. Last slide. As we look ahead, we're really hoping to continue learning and refining this process. We are out there today, actually, weeding and monitoring. We just finished infill planting the site for this season with the help of volunteers, and we'll continue to engage in spaces like this where we can learn from each other. Thanks so much.